VRF, or volunteer reporting form. They report out on what it is, and then they go back to the internet, or they fill out their reporting form. They go back to the internet and send it to our post headquarters. So this is our offices in our 65 countries. And then it comes back to headquarters and is compiled and analyzed and reported out. The issue that we're running into now, and really there's some issues and there's some opportunities. The one issue is that from that first simple Excel spreadsheet that we started with, it's gotten a lot more complicated. And this is due to, one, just making sure that we are capturing everything our volunteers are doing. Again, our volunteers are working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, so they're doing a lot of things. And so there was an expansion of the things that we wanted to track because we wanted to give people credit for what they're doing. So it was out of love in which we made this thing get real big. However, the consequence of that has become pretty complicated for them. And so that's kind of, as you'll see when we dive into the data, we have a whole bunch of indicators. So part of that has been wanting to capture everything that the volunteers are doing, and another part of it is that we've gotten a lot of basically like other government programs, like let's take for example USAID, has started to see that actually if you give money to Peace Corp, it's a bigger bang for the buck than if you gave it to like a normal USAID contractor. So that means that like we're getting literally millions of dollars from other government agencies who are giving their money to Peace Corp, but that means that we need to report back on the things that they want, that they are reporting back on. So that means we not only had all of our things that we were reporting on, but we now have to report on the things that USAID wants, or the things that PEPFAR, which is the Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief. So we've kind of added a whole bunch of more stuff to our things that we're asking our volunteers to do. So throw in this new opportunity now, or I guess throw in the fact that our volunteers are way out there, and usually our volunteers serve where no one else is willing to serve, and that means that we have really spotty connectivity. And so it would be really awesome if they could just, fill out on a web form what they're doing, and we could have it seamlessly come back. But some volunteers are traveling, 2 days to get to internet, that sort of thing. And when they get there, we're talking about some volunteers with slower than dial-up speed and very little bandwidth. So anything that's like complicated is very frustrating, and I've been there, and Finda can talk to this about being at an internet cafe and dealing with really slow internet, which is really frustrating. Anyways, that all being said, we have this new opportunity now where just in the last year or so we've had basically a smartphone revolution in terms of people now are going equipped with smartphones because they're bringing them from home. They're just more likely to work abroad, and they're more likely to have them. So now our volunteers are kind of armed with these smartphones. The connectivity is getting better every single day, and it's still frustratingly bad, but again, it's getting better and better and better and better and better. And the technology with offline, online sync is getting better. So we have this kind of interesting new opportunity, these new tools that we want to take advantage of. That with our current system, it's a Silverlight application that doesn't work on a tablet and doesn't work on a mobile phone. So that means that there's lots of issues with that. So we want to get to a place where we can take advantage of the fact that a volunteer now there's a path to a volunteer reporting in real time. And take advantage of the offline online sync, SMS, all the tools that are out there now to help to make it really easy for a volunteer to report out on what they're doing. Really easy for our post staff to digest that data and make adjustments, kill things that are not working well, support things that are working really well, and then at the same time also have it digestible here at headquarters so we can report out to the American public what the impact of their dollars being spent on, and then also report out to our host countries' governments who are having Peace Corps volunteers there. Report out to them the impact that the volunteers are having, and what and just show off and encourage them to keep inviting us and keep supporting Peace Corps volunteers. So that's kind of the big picture where we're at right now. We need to record more than we've ever recorded before, but we need to make it easier so that our volunteers will actually report. But we do have some really cool opportunities with the increased technology out in the field, as well as the increased connectivity. So I'm going to hand it over to Matt quickly. Does anybody have any questions about that? I went over a whole lot of stuff there. I guess I can look at it.
Yeah, let me, everyone, if you're not speaking, or if you could just turn off your video, because we have some people that are trying to join, and sometimes the video is just bandwidth, the available bandwidth. So if you could just turn off your video, that would be helpful. And then if anyone has any questions, feel free. I think we're okay on time, so I'd like to have this interactive. Thanks.
Yeah. It's supposed to be a hangout, right? So it's just talking back and forth.
That's cool.
That felt like a presentation for me. So,
right. Okay.
So that's like the big picture of where we're at with reporting at Peace Corps. Matthew, if you just want to talk about maybe, just you go ahead. Do what you need to do.
Okay. So I'm gonna just go one layer more detailed on this, which is when we introduced Raj, we talked about how he's working on kind of this project called RealTrack, and I want to just create a quick distinction between kind of like where we are today with this reporting effort and then where we're going to be basically a year from now. So what we're doing with this project and what we're hoping to have this team's efforts concentrated on is getting Peace Corps to where we want to be a year from now. And so we've got kind of the current data structure and the current reporting structure as it is today. And what we're working on with Raj and what we're working on with the first take on this, the RealTrack project, is how do we make that easier for volunteers and more accessible to volunteers. And what the team here at Peace Corps headquarters is doing is looking at this data structure that Patrick described as very complicated, sometimes cumbersome, and difficult to fully wrap your head around because of how big it's gotten. What we want to do with this PeaceTrack effort is make that a lot easier for the end user. And hopefully at the same time the team here is also simplifying the data structure a little bit and trying to make this thing a little bit lighter weight and a little bit smaller. So all that to say, we're going to try to do our best to give you as much information about the decision-making process that's happening here. That way the mobile application we're designing for a year from now is going to match up as best as possible, and then that also can be a change agent. So any great ideas and innovation that we're inserting into this application now can help drive the way we're thinking about how to make our reporting better, more accurate, easier to use down the road as well. So what I'm going to do real quick is send a link to where these files are on our GitHub that I uploaded a few minutes ago that have some updated kind of latest and greatest on this. So let me do that very quickly here. And I'll just add it to the comment string so everyone has it. And we'll just talk through this in a very quick way, and then we'll continue to keep things updated. And I know, Rose, we're going to spend a little bit of time talking through how GitHub's structured and how we're going to be updating that. So we'll just add this link here for a second. So if people see that on their group chat screen, I just added that link. And what we're kind of looking at is is basically kind of the data structure that we're talking about. And there's two PDFs there, one that represents the data structure as it exists today, and then one that represents what our team is currently envisioning it'll look like a year from now. And so that year from now one is the one that we're really trying to delve into and make it accessible. And if you have that PDF open, and there's also a Microsoft Visio document that has the files that created these two PDFs, there's a middle layer that's basically a big green bar. As you read through the requirements documents that's on the repo, it explains how this reporting hierarchy works, all the way from a project level down to these very specific indicators, which is, for example, number of teachers trained on X. And what we are hoping is to figure out a better way for people to be able to input into this application, here's what I did today, or here's what I've done this week, and for the application to help them map to this very large data structure that has a lot of things like how many teachers did you train on X, and it helps people either through a tagging cloud or text recognition or whatever other great ideas we have, makes that data entry process a lot easier. So that's kind of the big pie-in-the-sky goal, is to make all of this easier for the end user and be very innovative and creative about how we approach that problem. So we're going to be meeting with the team later today, and so we'll be pushing a lot of updates to that GitHub repo after that meeting as well, once we get even more feedback on this. And we'll talk through that in this Hangout, how that's going to get updated to all of you as well. So that's kind of the portion that I wanted to highlight.
So there's I wanted to even drop this little bit of information, like so there's going to be like a whole bunch of, like, do we have a glossary for that thing? That would be that's like the thing is as tough as like some of these words just to come up with, but so if you think about maybe just the three separate reporting structures we have right now, one is what we're going to call the volunteer reporting tool. So that's like our very current one that the volunteers are using right now. That's the one that Finda filled out. That's the one that that's the one that's happening on the ground right now. That's the Microsoft Silverlight application. RealTrack is an Android application that we've developed over the last 2 years. It was really just meant as a note-taking app for people to fill out and then write down, basically jot down the things that they won't remember, and then fill it out the VRF, or VRT, volunteer reporting tool, later on. PeaceTrack is a world in which we kind of don't have the VRT anymore, and PeaceTrack is like the real deal, like on the ground, reporting from your phone, live updating type of deal. So it's kind of three things. It's like VRT is the past, RealTrack is kind of a supplement to the VRT, and then PeaceTrack is like is the future. So that's kind of, I wanted to separate those three out very clearly. Maybe we'll, I think also maybe I'll walk through some of the words that you see here. So first we have indicate. So basically, first you have like, I guess maybe we could start with, you got your the structure, structure. But maybe you could walk us from like the top of like a goal down to an outcome, basically.
Yeah.
So yeah, and the file, just to be super clear, that we're all looking at, that I linked to, is Project Data Framework 2015 proposed version 2. So if anyone's having problems with that, just add that, text us in the group chat if you're having problems finding that file.
Yeah, so if you're looking at this document, there's different levels of basically definitions. So the first thing that you're going to have is a project goal, and that's going to be sort of the highest level that a volunteer is really going to be worrying about, and that is, the most general, broad overview of what you're working towards. Underneath that, you're going to have objectives, which again get a little bit more defined, and under objectives are outputs. So when a volunteer is doing a project, they're looking to record the outputs or the outcomes of those of that activity. So that would be, today I had an English class and I had 12 students show up, and so you would record that, and then that particular piece of information then speaks to the broader objective, which is have English classes, and then above that you would have your goal, which is improving the English skills of students in X community.
Can you talk a little bit difference between an output versus an outcome?
Yeah. So output is going to be something really tangible. So it's going to be a precise number that you can measure. So number of students, scores on tests, like something that is a very definitive, measurable outcome. Or output. Yes.
Output.
Whereas outcome is going to be sort of your overarching, longer-term effect of what you're doing. So over the course of time, your outcome might be improving English skills of your students, whereas output would be number of students showing up to your English classes.
So output a little bit shorter term, outcome is a longer thing, and outcomes are harder to measure, but they're more important, right? Yeah. So you don't care how many people show up to the English class, you care about how many people learn English. Yeah. Or you don't care about how many people show up to the agricultural fair, you care about how many people are growing more food for cheaper. Yeah. So people use outcomes and outputs because outputs are a little bit easier to measure in real time, and you can say, okay, if I do, then you can kind of, after a while you can say, okay, if I do this amount of outputs, I can expect this amount of outcomes. Yeah. And so that's something that kind of grows out over time. So again, it's like you got this goal is bigger, then you got a little bit smaller. That is an objective underneath there. And then you have these indicators, which are outputs and incomes, and indicators are just what you're actual asking for. So exactly. An indicator can be either an output indicator or an outcome indicator, but that's just like what you're actually reporting on. So examples of indicators are number of people, number of trees planted, or number of students taught this, number of trees planted, number of teachers trained.
Materials developed for classes. Yeah. Like, it's basically anything that you're producing or doing underneath an activity.
Very, very quantitative. Yeah. So that's for me. Those are the most confusing things when I was first diving into the whole M&E in general. Yeah. But that's kind of something just kind of wrap your head around a little bit.
Yeah, and if you still have questions on that, I found the easiest way to sort of figure it out is by actually looking at some of the example project frameworks that we have that actually have the goals and the objectives and the indicators defined for you, because that way you can sort of put it together in your head going backwards as opposed to trying to figure out what a project goal might be, but having an example project goal and then moving forward.
We have one of those. Yeah.
Yeah, that's underneath the reference materials on the GitHub page.
Okay, so on the GitHub page, on the reference materials, there's some examples.
So can we go over a scenario from the volunteer who's actually using the application, and then how that would translate into what you all see? Can we? So I'm a Peace Corp volunteer, and I don't know, I'm training. I'm giving a lesson in English or something like that. So what would I do with my mobile app to collect the data that you all need?
So this is, we're talking PeaceTrack here. So the ideal world here is that a volunteer does something, and then they enter into a text box a description of what they do. That would be the ideal situation, or at least something that easy. Meaning they don't have to dive into what the hell all this stuff matches up or whatever like that, but this idea of I went out, I did this, I write a description of it really quickly, I save it.
Okay, and so so let's say that I am teaching English. I'm teaching English in Kenya somewhere, and then I write a description. How many people, do you need any kind of data like that? How many people are students that were there? Are we taking the date and time? Are we having a location attached to it, or just very simple?
Right. So what I keep starting with is that vision of like I'm just recording what I'm doing. So like that would be basically the training. Now we would love to use the technology to either collect metadata on that so we can get all those things that are important. So like all those things you mentioned, Rose, are things that would be valuable for us to report on, and probably even necessary for us to report on. But we'd love to use, collecting metadata, like just collect your GPS location and it just happens automatically, or you are you're writing in your text, like had an English class today where we did training, and somehow it could pick up on the, it could do text recognition and pick up English and training, and then look for a number or something like that inside to be able to report out on. So that is kind of the how that works exactly is the challenge for us all to figure out over the summer. But I guess what I just want to paint this picture of a world in which the volunteer is just putting in a description of what they want, or what they did, a description of what they did, and then we use the technology to nudge them to enter things that would actually be helpful to us, in a way that doesn't really take a lot of training, but really we could just, the application can just continue to push them in the right direction over time. And then we take that information and then we use technology to be able to do all the complicated stuff afterwards. So that it's kind of a flip of what we do now. Right now we ask the volunteer to match up everything that they're doing to this very complicated structure on their own. And we want to actually take that out of the hands of the volunteer and say, you just tell us what you did and we'll figure out where the hell it goes and matches up with our complicated thing, and we'll report on it, and then we'll give you feedback on what happened. So it's a little bit of a flip.
Okay, so really the volunteers would be the data collectors, right? If that's right. And then when they do have connectivity, you want it to automatically push it out to, let's say, our web app server, so that you all can collect all that data and then report out on it, right?
Yes.
That's fair to say. Anyone else have any questions at all? I can, I'll unmute everyone, but make sure that you mute yourselves if you are not speaking. Okay, so you guys have control of that, so we won't have. And actually, Shruti, let me tell you technology. Actually, Shruti, I got Shruti on the line, but she's actually on Skype, and so I shared my screen, so in a roundabout way, she's actually here.
Nice.
Finally get that going. All right, so keep going. I'm sorry. I know there's a lot of stuff going.
Rosario, I say hi to everyone.
Oh. Okay, that's Shruti.
Hi,
did you hear her?
Hi.
Okay. Thank you.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, everyone.
All right, go ahead. Go ahead, Patrick. You can continue. I guess no one has any questions or anything, so.
Yeah, and if questions will be helpful, just if don't ask the dumbest question you possibly can, and then it'll help me direct what it is.
Can you hear me? Oh, sorry. I have more of a comment on that. Just it would be a lot easier for me to make some sort of template instead of doing pattern matching, like what you're saying with entering a paragraph and all that stuff. Would it be okay with you if I do some sort of template, asking them what the activity is and then what the outcomes are? You know what I mean?
Well, so I would say there's two things about that, Sheila. It's we're basically setting this goal of one text box as the aspiration of saying we want to get to that level of simplicity, or as close to that level as possible. But I want us to think about okay, how could we make this the absolute easiest possible thing it could do, and just to put that out as a goal and a challenge is to say, okay, this is what we want to do, and we might have to walk it back to go there. But I want us to start with a world in which we're trying to make this so user-friendly or as user-friendly as possible. So I would say like I want to be clear that that's like our aspiration and our goal, and if we can get there, that's wonderful. If we have to walk it back a bit, that's we got to walk it back a bit. That's just how it is. So I put that out there as a challenge to us to try to figure out, keep nicking away as like what could we take away, what sort of burden can we take away from the volunteer. What little things can we keep continuing to make automatic or fluid or prompted or whatever. The other thing that I think that what has been a complication over time is that if I'm a volunteer in Thailand, how many indicators? Remember that it was like 60.
60, yeah.
So it's like 60 different things as a Thailand education volunteer, maybe that I'm reporting out on. Meaning it's hard to remember what the hell these things are. So they would that's why actually we wanted them to just kind of say what they're doing, and then we can, the computer or the technology or people here, staff could know those things and be able to match it to it. So that's like one problem we're trying to solve too, is this idea that like we want to eliminate the need for the volunteer to have to remember exactly all the indicators. They should know their goals and they should know their objectives, but the indicators underneath, like the exact things like that, are just, unless we can get them simplified, it's going to be hard for people to remember. So that's the kind of the two angles on that. Sheila, is like one is an aspiration, and the two is like this like fact that like it's hard for them to. It's actually harder for us to ask them to do some of that stuff up front when they just don't know all of them, and they might change over time. Oh, sorry, I'm bumping around a little bit, but it's important to also remember that like as of right now, they only, our volunteers report once, maybe 3 times a year, maybe 2 times a year, possibly 4 times a year, depending on which country they're in. So that's been a major issue for them, is remembering over that time what you did over the last 3 months, and especially remembering how many girls under 14 did you teach how to do, reproductive health. Like that the ability to remember that kind of detail over a long period of time is tough.
You mentioned something, so I have is the gamification, is that for the Malaria app, or was that for this one too?
Yeah, I mean we talk a lot about gamification in the Malaria app.
Okay, now we can wait on that.
Gamification is probably part of every app these days.
Yeah.
Or at least some aspect of it.
Let me ask. You mentioned that the Peace Corps volunteers they know their goals. How would they know their goals? Is that something that we can push out from the web app and then push it out to that particular volunteer, or they would have to just sign on, or that's something that we can do on the back end? So how would they know their goals? Is that something that they tell us that process?
Well, so a Peace Corps volunteer goes through 3 months of training before they go. So this is a unique thing about Peace Corps that is also an advantage, is that we do have 3 months to actually train them up on these things. So if we're drilling into their head, and obviously we are, like, here's our objectives, here's what you're doing out here, this is what we're training you how to meet these objectives. So part of that would be ingrained in them. But to teach them to remember 60 indicators is a little bit harder to do. So, for example, a project that they're doing, so if I'm a Thailand teacher, I might only have 3 objectives, or I might have maybe 2 goals and a couple objectives underneath those. So that higher level data structure we will train to. We've messed around with a little bit on RealTrack of just like presenting a reference, so like it was called the project framework. So it's just basically an outline of their objectives, goals, indicators as a reference. So I think what we want to do is we're gonna get 80% of it through our training. And this is like hand-to-hand combat, like direct training of the volunteers of here's what you're out here to do, here's how you do it. But then if we can use technology to supplement, remind, keep it in the top of their brain of like what's happening over 2 years is the idea. So technology can supplement that part of it.
Yeah, so Fenda, can you unmute yourself, or did I have to do that to actually share that story a little bit? She mentioned in the chat area that the office, let's see.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah, you can. Thank you so much.
All right. Hi, everyone. Sorry I wasn't able to introduce myself. My name is Fenda. I'm a recently returned Peace Corp volunteer as of February, and I'm one of the project managers for the Malaria app. So yeah, I just wanted to add, like, gamification wasn't it's not a high priority because like our office so I was in Botswana. So our office, our Peace Corps office in Botswana, our program managers there would contact the volunteers and be like, you didn't submit your report on time, or they wouldn't sign our leave paperwork until we successfully submitted all our reporting on time.
That's good to know.
Well, yeah, I mean, we're using any means necessary to incentivize volunteers to do reporting. But we want to get to a world in which we're working on, from our side, it's like explaining the importance of reporting and how it relates to the work that the volunteer is doing, and then also make it a lot easier for them to report, so we don't have to rely on like not signing their leave paperwork or giving them other rewards. Like a volunteer is motivated by helping their community. That's why they're there. That's why they spend 2 years there. And we want to pull off that. We want to continue to draw that motivation. And I think right now they are motivated for the most part. It's just that we've made the process so complicated that it's become a barrier to them. And not only like the actual data entry, but like our ability to process that and give it back to them and see like what they're doing and how it's related to the work of the other volunteers and how it's related to the ecosystem of development. Like if we can't process that stuff and get it back to them very quickly, they don't see the impact of that, and they don't see the value as much of their reporting.
You mentioned how often are they required to report back or to provide that information? You mentioned 3 or 4 times a year, but is that the norm or is that the requirement?
That is the norm. So we don't have a headquarters like requirement of it. Maybe it might be 2 times a year or something like that. But in reality, 65 countries that are kind of autonomous in a certain sense, we give them the ability to kind of control when they ask their volunteers and how often to report. I mean, the reason why it's 3 times a year is, or like the reason why it's not every 2 weeks is because it's too hard. And it's a lot of work for it's not only a lot of work for the volunteers, it's a lot of work of our post staff to do it in our current system. So we're getting data sometimes at headquarters that's like 6 months old, and by the time anybody sees it, or sometimes it never makes it all the way there because we've moved on or something like that. So I think the reason why it's so sparse in our reporting right now is not because we don't think we should be reporting more often. It's just that it's just difficult for us to do it, and our current system and the connectivity of the volunteers is kind of the limiting factor.
Yeah, and Pooja and Ronnie had great questions also. So what if there's multiple volunteers working on the same project? And do each of them have to enter in the same data? And then what is the maximum number of volunteers that you have working on the same project?
So the maximum number of volunteers working on the same project. That's a tough question to ask. So in a country, they'd all be working towards our goals. So some of our countries have 250, 300 volunteers working towards maybe the same goals. Now, an individual, I'm going to introduce a new word, activity. So an activity would be like a study session, one classroom, a training session, a bike ride, something. I don't know. That's a terrible example. But the idea that an activity, you could have multiple volunteers maybe co-running a training. And that has been an issue for us. And so you can see what Finda just wrote about how right now we're saying we tell the volunteers to, okay, make sure you talk to each other and make sure you don't double report. But that has been a major issue for us over the time and really affected our data integrity, is the idea of volunteers reporting out the same thing. So if Finda and I both ran a training, and we said, we trained 13 farmers to do it. We both report it out, and somehow it gets back to headquarters, and we're like, we trained 26 people, which is not true. So that is an issue that we need to definitely think about. We haven't necessarily solved that problem yet, and that's a challenge for us, for this group, is to figure out how we can chip away at that issue.
That's a really great exercise for the teams, because you really need to do some data mapping, I guess, from the examples that they've given in the spreadsheet, and they're all on GitHub. So a country has several goals, right, Matthew? Patrick. They may have 1 or 2, 3, 4, 5 goals, right?
Yep.
And then based on the activity of the volunteer, those activities are applied against any one of those goals, right?
Correct.
Yeah,
Correct.
So that's a great data design exercise for the entire team, really. And I think that starting from there, just trying to understand from the examples that they gave on in that spreadsheet, that's probably a great exercise for the students to work on together, so that they can understand, because that's going to help you with the flow and how you're actually going to collect the data versus how you're assigning those data. Because data integrity is where all of this really, in the long run, fits in.
Right.
I don't know if any other mentors have any suggestions on that, or any other questions. We're getting a lot of questions in the chat area, so make sure you're Patrick, looking at the chat area as well. Yeah.
I would say what Finda said there too is so the other thing about the idea of in our current tool, you say there's a question of did you work with another volunteer on this activity? If so, who? So again, to get to our world in which I described what I did. I said I did a teacher training activity with Finda, and we talked to 13 people. The idea that we could somehow take that same concept and recognize the fact that we're working with another volunteer, and who that is, and that would be able to parse that out somehow.
Yeah, because I can see, let's say, Finda, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I can see you assigned to a particular activity, but also using the Malaria app too. So that's why I actually wanted to make sure that we all were understanding the data integrity that has to happen from using the app, and then that's why Ronnie and I are working together really closely to bring that all together so that it can, you can visually see that data in a report format from the back end. So good stuff.
Okay.
Good stuff.
Let's see.
Yeah.
I'll throw out another major complication. So like you guys right on the bat hit this, like multiple volunteers. The other thing that's interesting is like the same person coming to 10 different trainings. So the idea being like, Matthew and Anna are in my community, and I hold 3 trainings, and they show up to all 3 of them. And so if I say, I had 2 people at my first one, I had 2 people at my second one, I had 2 people at my third one, but they were both Matthew and Anna all 3 times, really we're only affecting 2 people. But this idea that, like, the idea that we're, like, reporting out that we're maybe touched 6 people. So that's been another issue that's, like, kind of a tricky thing. So in there you'll see this thing called a reporting cohort. And so a reporting cohort is, you can think of it as a group of people. So like when I was a volunteer, I worked with I had a girls youth group, and so that would have been a reporting cohort. And we did multiple things. So we did little reading sessions, but then we also would like go and do maybe a malaria activity and teaching them. So this idea that like you have these different groups of people that you work with on a lot of different things, and they do different activities. And so that's the other big vocabulary word for us all to remember is reporting cohort is a group of people. And again, I had a basketball team, and I had a girls club, and I also had like my students at my school. I also had teachers, my fellow teachers at my school. Then I had maybe the parents of my youth group. All of these being different groups of people that I did multiple activities, and I probably invite all of them to all of them. Like for example, I had my students come and mentor my youth group, girls' youth group. So that would be like one activity, but I have 2 groups of people that are like in it. So that's like another issue. Sheila's question: do volunteers have unique ID numbers? The answer is yes. The PCVs all have a PCV ID, Peace Corp volunteer ID number. So, and Vinda already answered that. Cool. Let's see. Are the volunteers working on the same project, fixed and pre-decided? Okay. Another good question. So the idea, okay, so are they working on a fixed project? Yes. So we tell them, we say, okay, you are a Thailand education volunteer, and this is your main job. So like for in my example, I was a science teacher at a secondary school, and that was my main job, what we call like our primary project, is like a word that we put around there. So that's what I did. Now, I also picked up this youth girls club, and I picked up on a few other things. Like every once in a while I would go and do agriculture stuff with people, but just because, that's what you do. You got enough time, you could do other things. So there's this concept of you're doing also secondary projects, and so those things might not be exactly what you're doing or what you were assigned to do, but you can do other things. And in an ideal world, we could report some of that, but then we might have to say that we can't report on everything, and we don't need to report on everything. So we're just gonna focus on our primary project. So it's kind of a dodge of that question, but in reality, is like we do have primary projects, and we have things that they're supposed to do. A lot of volunteers choose to go above and beyond, and do whatever. So.
Okay, great. Anyone has any questions so far? I think we've got a lot of foundational information. I hope, at least I think so. So, anyone have any other questions? Okay, let's go ahead and move on. Since we are at the top of the hour, we're doing good timing. What I want to do now is actually talk about the syncing up the mobile projects as well as GitHub and how we're approaching that. So one of the things that we talked about with Matthew as well as Patrick and the team at Peace Corp is that we do want to make sure that there is some development synergy between the two projects, meaning that it should be some of the screens or some of the flows should actually be the same, not same but similar. These will be Peace Corp volunteers that will be using, so it will absolutely be critical if they were moving from one application to the other, so that everybody will be familiar with one. And as well as the back end, we said that we were going to talk about the approach. We are going to do simple approach. Now, we talked about the data integrity, which I think that is a great exercise to start with. I'm going to mute someone here because if we all do that exercise, if you all do that exercise as a team, I think it'll flow a lot better because Ronnie is actually doing work on the back end as well. So making sure that everything is connected and flowing between the two projects, but these should be Peace Corp mobile apps that you're creating and a Peace Corp web server. So a lot of the development should definitely have some similarity to it and some consistency if we do this the right way. Additionally, on GitHub, what we've done, and we've been working probably for a couple of months now on trying to figure out what's the best way. I actually worked with GitHub and then worked with Peace Corp. What we found was the best way is that I have already forked all of Peace Corp projects from their repos. So you will only work from Systers repos, and you can tell when you go and you log into GitHub and you see your particular repos, your projects, you'll see each one of them have. And the way that Peace Corp works, I'm going to go to GitHub right now. The way Peace Corp works is that they actually have the repos by platform. So you will see PeaceTrack iOS, PeaceTrack Android, and there will always be a README file. We decided early on that we would create a repo just for all of the documentation. There was a lot of sample data like the spreadsheet, requirements doc. All of your design documents should go in here as well. But again, only work from Systers repo. The reason is our approach is going to be iterative. We want to do 2 weeks worth of work or something that's really sound to do. You finish up at 2 weeks, do some testing, make sure you're documenting as well, and then we have access. I think Matthew, I will work with Matthew to some of the Peace Corp volunteers, and we'll get some live feedback from those people that are actually going to use it. So we don't continue down the path of making sure maybe they don't like this functionality, or maybe we need to take a different approach on the flow. And that's always helpful. You don't always get that on projects. So be happy that we have those kind of feedback. And we'll figure it out. I think Android, because it's open, is a lot better. I'm not sure if anyone is on iOS. I will find out from Matt. Matt is from Big Nerd Ranch, and he had a client meeting right now. But I'll find out from him if that's something that we can push out and have everyone test, do at least some user testing in the meantime. So every 2 weeks we want to come together in PMs. Keep that in mind to wrap up things, and you want to do code reviews every 2 weeks, okay? Once your mentors have approved your code review, then you can submit a pull request, and I will take care of making and pushing those to Peace Corp. We've already got that workflow arranged. That's why why Sisters is like the middle person or the midware to all of the updates. So that's one. So hopefully everybody understands GitHub. Only use Sisters repo. Have something ready to test every couple of weeks. And I know in the very beginning we're going to do a lot of data documentation. And if that's something that we can do as a team to come back, no problem. We can, let's do this the right way and make sure that we are approaching the project correctly. Additionally, so we talked about Sync, we talked about GitHub, and I think Matthew and Patrick, Peace Corp, we probably want to do a demo, I would say before midterm, and that's like mid-June. I want to say. I have to look at the timeline. And, we're taking simple approaches. We are going to deliver what we said we were going to deliver. Nothing more until we have actually worked on the features that are in the requirements document. And that is something you're going to learn in just the entire software development lifecycle, really. Nikki or Chuki, you all have had that project management experience or being on a project of software development. Is everyone there?
Yeah, we're still here.
Yeah. Okay. And so what we will do is actually have a demo together. The project managers, Nikki as well as Fenda, will keep everybody on track. It's really easy to say, oh, well, let's do this design, or let's take this approach, or I found something cool. Let's do simple stuff first. Let's deliver and code what we said we were going to deliver and code in the requirements document. Then later, hopefully you guys will continue on the project. We have this program, GSoC program, but we do want to actually keep you on the project as well, and I'm sure Peace Corp does as well. And then later on we can do that, and we can do a lot of enhancement. But for now, our approach is very simple. Let's get through the requirements. I think the very first thing I want you guys to do is actually hold on just a second. Shrudi's calling back in. The very first thing I want you to do is do this data design exercise together, and then work on your timeline for next week, and I'll post that on our wiki as well. Any questions about the approach, about GitHub, about anything?
Yeah, I actually have a question about the data design that you're speaking about.
Okay.
Is it something that is local to just the mobile app, or are we actually going to be using that same design for the future server?
Yes, we are. We're actually working, Ronnie and I are actually working on the back-end piece to that. So when the mobile app is collecting all of that data, we're pushing it to the web app server project.
When we start off, they are not connected, right? Like I expect something like you export from the mobile app and then we somehow upload it, so they're completely disjoint. But then at some point in the future, they will talk directly to each other. Is that the plan?
Yes, and hopefully that future will be this this at the end of the summer. That's the plan, and that's why Ronnie and I are working really closely with you both to work out the data. And and this is mentioned so many times, is that the mobile applications, even though they're on their mobile devices, the Peace Corps volunteer doesn't always have connectivity. So think about think about the design of the application and how you're actually going to store that data until there is connectivity. Is that something that you're going to do automatically, or is it, you know, pushing a button or something and then doing it so that the user has more control? I'll let you guys take that on. But that is the plan, to actually have the PCVs, the mobile app users, to collect the data and then push it to our server, which Ronnie and I are working on.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Good question. Anything else? Anyone else? All right, hold on. I'm going to answer. Okay. All right, so at this point, let's take a it's 8:12. I don't know what time it is there. I'm sorry. My PC is on West Coast time. It is 11:12 East Coast time for me. So let's take a 15-minute break and let's everybody be back at 15 minutes, sorry. 11:30. Does that sound good? Yes? Okay. All right, so I'm going to leave this channel open, and I'll just meet back here in 15 minutes at the bottom of the hour. Thank you.
开会前录。
Okay, so is everyone back? Hi, Kristen.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm sorry for my trouble with connecting.
No, that's okay. Everybody understand. And what we're doing, Kristen, because there's so many people that are have connectivity issue, is that if we can disable your video, turn off your video if you're not talking. I mean, if you're not speaking.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Sure. And I have 2 people on Skype right now too, so. Matthew, Patrick, or is everyone back from the Peace Corps? Let me. Hey, Matthew?
Yes, we are.
Okay, great. All right, so let me share my screen first with okay. And then, alrighty. So, welcome again. Welcome back. We have Kristen from Big Nerd Ranch as well. She's an Android mentor on the Malaria app. So, Kristen, if you wouldn't mind just introducing yourself. Everyone has already introduced themselves earlier, and we appreciate Kristen actually. She's actually on vacation in Charleston, South Carolina, so we appreciate you taking the time out of your vacation to join us. Let me see if I can. There we go. Christian, you still there? Okay, we'll get her when we come back. Let's go ahead and start with the Malaria app. And Matthew, do you all want us to look at something or look at a documentation while you're talking about the Malaria app?
Yeah, I guess we could say the what is that thing? Where is that? This is on GitHub. This is the requirement doc. So the requirement doc on GitHub probably would be the best thing to kind of look at.
Okay, you can put your video on so that everyone can see you. And
but that stunning picture of Matthew, I just like looking at that as much as possible.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, we're back.
Okay. Great.
So yeah, so do we want to send them like a link to that? Or?
Yeah, I mean,
it's under Peace Corp GitHub Malaria app.
It's Malaria app README, and then it's the requirements document version 5, updated 19 days ago. That's what we're looking at.
I'll send a link here. Before we get going. Okay. It is. Okay. So in there is a lot of background, but if I could just give a little overview of this. So Peace Corps volunteers obviously are serving in some pretty interesting locations, and a lot of these are places. Well, I don't say a lot, but there's quite a bit of number that are serving in malaria endemic areas. And malaria obviously is a major killer. Kills about 600,000 individuals every year, but it's a totally preventable disease. Peace Corps has it's a really interesting situation. Our volunteers, because they actually are taking a malaria prophylaxis for 2 years, and so malaria prophylaxis is kind of like is just a medicine you take that would keep you from getting malaria. Pretty much super effective if you take it and you're religious about it and don't mess up. You won't get malaria for the most part. Not even for the most part. It's just like, we're talking about small percentages of people that possibly get up, but we've had very few cases over the years. In fact, 0 over the last 100. We had 113 cases of malaria within our volunteers in the last year, and none of them came when volunteers were actually taking their malaria medication. So the question is, how are we still getting 113 confirmed cases of malaria when we provide free medication to our volunteers? So that's the challenge. And so there's kind of the tough part about it is that one is like volunteers are very I guess it's the idea that the real challenge is maintaining it over 2 years and not messing up. So you can do measures, basically wearing protective clothing, wearing mosquito repellent, and then sleeping under a bed net, and then taking your malaria prophylaxis. If you do these things and you do them religiously, you are not going to get malaria from those. However, volunteers, it's just difficult to maintain those activities over 2 years, especially when you're surrounded by a lot of people that are not doing those things. So like a volunteer in a community, there might be 1 or 2 or 3, maybe 4 people that can actually afford to have malaria prophylaxis drugs. So you are unique. There's a lot of people that almost a lot of people are sleeping under bed nets and doing what they can to avoid malaria, but you're kind of sticking out in terms of actually taking the drugs. So anyways, the idea of the app is to help volunteers stay religious with these malaria prevention activities, something that can assist them in keeping themselves healthy and happy. So the basic concept is based off of this CDC report. We just did a big research effort to figure out why is it that volunteers are still getting malaria even though that's preventable and whatever. And so the number one answer was they forgot, quote unquote, forgot to take their malaria prophylaxis. And so for most people that's actually true. They just forgot, and that's something that like the app is kind of focused on, is this idea of a reminder system. A lot of volunteers use a reminder system now with their cell phone, and it's been shown that to be a good tactic. This is just basically like a little bit of an alarm that reminds them to take their malaria prophylaxis. And so we said, okay, let's maybe we could take that concept and try to tackle the other reasons why people don't remember, or don't take their medication. So like the other main thing is that there's like a lot of confusion about the side effects of these medications. And especially a lot of confusion and worry about taking these medications over an extended period of time. So we did a lot of research, and we did a lot of analysis of it, because there's a lot of conflicting reports out there. But the fact of the matter is that the risk of side effects of medications, which there are side effects to every medication, there are, including these the malaria prophylaxis drugs. The fact that we have to get across is that the risk of those side effects is not anywhere close to the risk of a disease that kills 600,000 people every year. And that's like the kind of the risk-benefit analysis that we need to make sure that we're providing volunteers with the most accurate information in real time, so they make a good decision on this. The other part of it, outside of this like little reminder feature, is this idea of like providing a place for the latest, accurate, unbiased, easy to digest data on the risks of side effects, new methods to protect yourself from malaria, latest research, all this stuff, and presenting it to the volunteer in a very clear and easy to understandable and relevant way that they can, when they've had a crazy dream on mefloquine, they can sit down and think about, okay, I'm not going to stop taking mefloquine. I'm going to make a decision to switch to another drug. So we can offer them three options. Excuse me. Choking on these chips, Matthew. Anyways, so that's kind of what we want to do is we want to provide this easy. We want to provide this reminder system to them. We also want to provide right next to it. We want to be able to provide really accurate information that seems unbiased, that the volunteer can make good decisions about how to protect themselves. And then kind of the reach goal outside of those two things is like using gamification, using data, status, all these things to kind of bring to create other incentives for them to make sure that they're taking their malaria prophylaxis, make sure that they're using protective clothing, make sure that they're using mosquito repellent, make sure they're sleeping under mosquito-treated bed net. So that's kind of the overall thing. But at Peace Corp, we are it's unacceptable that we have 113 cases of malaria. That is a very deadly disease that we lost a volunteer last year to malaria. An absolutely amazing volunteer that was doing a lot of good work, and so that's just unacceptable to us. And we're trying to think of new. We're trying anything possible to make it easier for volunteers to protect themselves, and support them in any way that we possibly can. And this is just another way that we could say, okay, figure out how could we use technology, how could we use a smartphone app, how can we use the latest, how can we use you guys to help protect these guys, because our volunteers are putting themselves at risk. They're serving in places where there is the risk of malaria, and we're asking them to do a really tough thing, which is maintain these prevention tactics for 2 years when most people are doing it for 2 weeks. In terms of like other foreign tourists, but the reality is that it's a tough thing, and we want to be able to support them. And so it's like this is like one of those things where this project is near and dear to my heart, just because we're talking about literally saving lives, and also not only saving lives, but then like even just like when a volunteer gets sick, their community, that school goes without a teacher, that youth group goes without a leader, that counterpart goes without a partner in crime. It's very, it's hugely, malaria is just devastating to economies, productivity, everything throughout these places, and it's no different with when it affects our volunteers. So that's kind of the overall view. I don't know if maybe Finda, I don't know if you want to talk about your experience with malaria prophylaxis, or I can't remember if you actually were in an endemic area or not. I don't know if she's there, or if anybody else has any questions.
Finda, are you there?
Yeah, I'm there. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now. Thank you.
All right. Well, so in Botswana, we're at the, we have like an imaginary line. So when I first started service, we were all required to take malaria medication. And so there's 2 types. One you can take like once a week, and then there's one you take every day. And then later in my service, they drew, it's not like a real line, but imaginary line, because they realized that the northern parts of Botswana, there are higher malaria cases than when you go towards the southern part, where you get closer to South Africa. And I agree with Patrick. There were a lot of like, we didn't, we were told there were a lot of like, he like here like things being said about like the effects of the medication, which caused volunteers to not want to take it. I did take mine on time, and I felt like it cleared up my skin, so I didn't have any problem with it. But it is definitely an issue among terms of adherence to taking the medication. But I'm happy to hear that though there are 100, it's not like it's not crazy high, but it is still an issue.
Okay, so anyone has any problems or questions that they want to ask? I know we've all seen the document, and the video is actually quite good too as well, to actually see some of the initial ideas behind the mobile app. So this is an opportunity for you all to actually ask any questions that you want. And I think what I'll do is just start off with the design. I think it was back in, oh gosh, March, where I visited the Peace Corps headquarters in Washington, D.C., and they had a team of students from the University of Michigan, or Michigan State. Michigan. And they actually did the initial design and the concept, and they presented that to Peace Corps medical officers. Is that what they're called? Medical officers?
Yeah, it's like our head of our health OHS, Office of Health Services. Yeah.
Right, and they actually, the design that you've seen in the documents came from the result of them asking a lot of the volunteers, and they were only there for a week, right? Yeah. And so the volunteers out in the field were very, very honest about what they saw, what they think they wanted, what they're used to. So they gave a great feedback in just that 1 week. So we'll get an opportunity to have that as well. So anyone has any questions, feel free to unmute your mic. We still have we're still making good time. And ask. I think what I like about the design is pretty straightforward. It's not busy. You know how some apps you have to pull out a menu or something like that, but everything is right on your fingertip, really.
And like Rose was saying, we're in a really good position on this. Because we have a lot of the assets already. We had a really amazing graphic designer who came in and created a lot of the buttons and the backgrounds and the color schemes and all this stuff so we've really set ourselves up here, and they really did. This was a whole. It doesn't seem like a lot because it's so simple, but it was like we expanded this thing out to absolutely anything. And then we took those ideas to the volunteers, and it actually kind of it really just reinforced what we had heard in the research, which is just like, they need something really easy to help them, and then they also just want a way to access facts. And so that's basically what it's about.
I have a question.
Sure.
And I think this is, I guess, for both of the projects in terms of like for the students updating the documentation. Did you want them to use that same doc file that you guys originally started, or I noticed on GitHub they have a wiki? Where exactly did we want the students to put their documentation?
So we will actually have, I don't know if we want to have it on the wiki or not. I think putting it on GitHub would be great. But what the students will do, they won't touch the requirements document. They will create a detailed design document. And the detailed design document will have some pseudocode or some screenshots of what they're thinking, or maybe some wireframes of some of the design. So it will be in parallel as to what they're doing as part of their coding. Now, typically in the past, we have done just putting our documentation on the wiki. I'm still looking at alternatives to that, but I think if we can just use just a regular Word doc or open Office doc, that would be fine too, and upload it into the README repo. So that's where we're keeping all of our documentation. That's a good question. We haven't really talked about that though.
And then my other question is concerning PeaceTrack. I know we wanted them to look consistent, and I haven't. So I apologize. I haven't really looked too much into PeaceTrack. But does PeaceTrack also have a mock-up of the design that looks similar, or is that where we'll all be needed to come together and work on that?
So when we first started out, PeaceTrack was already somewhat developed, and so what we decided, Patrick, is that we're opening that up to some design changes, and I think this is an opportunity for us to look at PeaceTrack again and compare to what is the design for Malaria, and that's where the synergy of the design and coding and development comes in. So that as a team together, in addition to the data exercise that we're going to do, that might be the very first thing that we tackle in the first 2 weeks, is the data and then the design of the common design for both. Okay. I'm going to unmute. Christian, are you there?
Hi, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, you can. Go ahead. Christian is, like I said earlier, she's vacationing in Charleston, so she's joining us. Can you introduce yourself, Christian?
Sure. My name is Kristen Marsicano, and I live in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm really excited to participate in this project as an Android mentor. I'm actually an Android developer and instructor. I teach a week-long Android course for the Big Nerd Ranch, so I've been able to teach that all over the world in the past year. It's been really fun. So I'm just looking forward to contributing in any way I can.
Thank you, Kristen.
Sure, thank you.
Sure. Any of the other students? You were mentioning Patrick, and this is something, where is the info hub for the Malaria going to come from? So Ronnie and I, again, are working on the web server app, and we noticed that part of the Malaria app is the info hub. Are you all putting that into is that something that you would want to add, or is that something that you are doing an RSS feed from CDC or something like that, or many other sources?
So right now it's designed the idea that we would kind of be the ones producing that. I would actually like to see what the reaction is to that. I think there is a hypothesis that maybe an RSS feed from another source might be valuable. There might be some value in that for some people that maybe think Peace Corp is trying to say one thing when it's maybe not, whatever. But for the most part, I think it's fine to just bring it from us, unless we see some reactions from it that say that we'd love to validate some other outside source that's validating it. But for right now, it's designed that would be something that we would put together. We'd put through that information, and really what we'd be doing is taking information from other sources and updating that. So it could be two ways. I mean, we originally thought, when we didn't think we had the resources, that we would just kind of create a static create static information that would go in there, that we would then maybe update the app, every once in a while with new information. In the ideal world, we would be updating it from a back end that we could push out a little bit faster, and maybe more in real time. And we could actually, do some more, with that you could do a lot more cool things. But that to be very clear on your question, Rose, right now we're going to start with the idea that this is something that Peace Corps is producing. Okay.
All right. So that's simple enough, right? Because we do want to take a very simple approach. Anike, am I pronouncing your name correctly? And I apologize if I'm not. But he had a question. What of the unit tests? How will we approach that? And will we submit it per documentation? So that's a good question too, because we do want to track not necessarily the unit testing, but definitely the user acceptance testing. Now in the development world, we call it user acceptance testing, but we definitely are going to include some volunteer. And I will have and we're actually going to keep that on the wiki because that's really critical for the open source community to see. There's some templates out there that we can use, so I will get that prepared for you before you start on that, though. Thanks for asking that question. Anyone else? Who's on the malaria? I know Finda, and we're having a little problem with the Skype folks listening in. But Ronnie, do you have any questions? Okay, so I'm going to ask more questions. So simple enough, we'll have Peace Corps to actually enter in from the server. So one of the things that both of the mobile projects will have to address is the lack of connectivity and how that actually gets all the information is transferred when we do have connectivity. Patrick, do you see that when the Peace Corps headquarters is entering in this data, for the information hub, do you see it being pushed out automatically to the mobile devices when there is connectivity to the internet? Or, and the reason I ask is because if there's some critical information, like an alert or something, you want that to get out to the team, to your volunteers right away. And if we rely on that, pushing that button to actually have them sync it themselves, could be missing something. So just...
Yeah. No, I think of it as the former. So I think of it as if it was something like a real alert, like an outbreak of something else, we would go through our traditional or standard communication practices, which would be our Peace Corps medical officer in a country would either email or text everybody, call everybody. So that I think the idea here is the info hub would be a place where we have just overall statistics and things that would not be as time sensitive as an alert or something like that. And so so it would be a situation where it's sync with Wi-Fi.
Yeah. Okay. And Ronnie had a question too. The gamification of this. I'll let you talk about that first, and then I want to share my experience of being in the presentation and what I saw particularly. But go ahead and talk about the gamification of the app itself.
So gamification, and you probably know the definition of gamification more than I, but the idea here is that we want to present status back to people, and we want to present goals and things like that. So, basically, if you look at the screens where it's providing back data of what they've done, that's kind of where we're at with that. It's just because this is actually designed almost as without a web backend, but we think you could do a lot more. But we thought we could just present back the data that was entered into the application by the user and present it back only to them. And so that's what when we're talking about gamification, we're really just talking about status here on that. I think there's something to be said for figuring out other incentives, like there's lots of ideas kicked around the idea of like a point system or something along that line. That's not really in this mock-up, but so at this minimum viable product right now, the only real gamification is the presentation of how they're doing with their adherence, their streak situation, those things, presented back to them just locally on their own phone. We think there could be some cool, we think there's some other aspects to this that we could explore that are based on competition. So like, how is Ghana doing against Botswana in adherence? That sort of thing that we could do if we had a web backend where we could kind of connect people. So like I think first of all it's just this basic stats on how you're doing, and then kind of going forward the thought of like introducing some competition or real world incentives, like a prize or something like that, if it based off of how well they're doing.
So I'm going to share my experience when I was actually there back in March. I think it was the first week of March. I was privileged to be a part of the audience that where the University of Michigan students presented their idea of gamification. And Patrick knows that we are an organization that actually promotes and helps women in technology. And what I saw was the University of Michigan team, there was only one woman on the team. And I think they started out with saying that, if they actually took the medication and they recorded it, that you could win prizes like Starbucks points or something like that, right? And, there wasn't too many people in the audience that were reactive to that. But then Eugenia, I think was her name, right? Eugenia, she mentioned, or you could win something for your mom, or maybe a calling card, and that right there was really a spark. So that idea, women bring very practical use to applications. The Starbucks is great, but when you have your Peace Corp volunteers out there, if one is, I worry a lot too. So any little thing that would be useful to the app, to encourage them to take the pill, to encourage them to actually record when they actually take the pill, is beneficial. The other thing I heard from the Peace Corps medical officer, I can't remember his name. I think he talked a lot in that meeting, Patrick, is that they don't want to track. They don't want the volunteers to think that they're tracking, or looking at being their parent and, wanting to see if they're actually taking their medication. This is really to help them, to help us. I live by my calendar, and if I don't have something on my calendar, even a simple PTA meeting or something like that, or an event, I won't forget. So think of this app as really a reminder, or some type of, hey, you took your medication, that's awesome, and then maybe some text or something like that, or they earn points, or they have a badge or something like that. These are really incredible applications that are really going to help the lives of the volunteers and keep them safe, but at the same time we want to make it very help them and be encouraging that they want to use it, that they come back and say, hey, okay, I earned this badge. Because I love Foursquare. I love the event that, you know, if I'm checking in at an airport or something, I'm like the mayor of that airport or something. So that's pretty cool to me. So those are my experience of what I learned while I was at the presentation, and it was very enlightening. As Patrick said, this is real. This is a real problem, and you all are part of a real solution. So even though this is great from a development standpoint, think about you actually helping someone to save a life. Think about it that way. Anybody have any questions? These are all really great questions, by the way. Wow, we're actually going to be on time because I had it as 2 hours and 15 minutes. That's totally awesome. I can't believe that.
Good.
Patrick, Peace Corp, do you all have any last-minute things that you want to add while we wrap up?
I want to, this is going to be one of 1,000 thank yous that I say, but on behalf of Peace Corp and our team here, and the communities that we serve, we really appreciate your efforts. It's just working on Peace Corp projects is the best because you're actually doing something that's going to affect somebody, and it's going to be complete additionality. Like some of these places, the volunteer represents their only link to some of these resources. They have, obviously they have tons of human resources within their community, but the access to you guys is something that people just don't have, and it's really cool to be a part of this and be able to truly collaborate across countries and provide assistance to a community. It's just really cool. So one you're gonna love it because it feels real, and it is real. And two, we do appreciate what you're doing, and we thank you for your service to everybody. So and also I had to say thanks to Rose too for being awesome in general, and just for making this all happen. So we were just commenting about how we could have gotten this lineup of superstars if we, especially Vic, how could we help Finda find, when she was a volunteer in her community, have access to all these people? And I don't even know how this happened, but somehow we've done it. So that's really cool. So it's a really little magical situation here. So, anyways, I'm gonna say thanks a lot, and it's because we're super appreciative of what you guys are doing. And two is anytime, day or night, if you have questions, you can email anybody on our team directly. If you want to talk to a volunteer, I can hook you up with somebody. If you want to, anything you need, you just do not hesitate to reach out to us. And I think everybody has my email, but I'm going to put it in here anyways. And I'll put my phone number too if anybody needs to call me on my cell phone with any questions.
Yeah, so Patrick, Matthew and I are going to manage all of that communication also. So if you all have any communication, remember, use the list to any type of technology. I created a Peace Corp IRC channel, so it's just Peace Corp. And some of the ASEAN team has used that, as well as the Micronesia team as well. Matthew is on there also. And then make sure you go to your PMs first, please. Make sure. They need to make sure that you are on track, and they need to feed all of that and manage the communication. And I will work with the PMs as well. So that's about it. And again, remember, Finda was a Peace Corps volunteer, so we actually have access to, if we have any questions, she's right there at your fingertip as well. And Niraj actually worked on the PeaceTrack, so he has a lot of data. He's been working on that probably for over a year now, so he has a lot of knowledge about the PeaceTrack, so don't hesitate to reach out to him. Thank you so much, Peace Corps team. We really appreciate it. I will get to DC probably the end of this month, I believe, or I think if it won't be end of this month, it'll be in July, but
Okay.
I'll definitely stop by and maybe we'll do something. There's Matthew.
He was over here the whole time.
The whole time, I know. That's Matthew. We've been kind of working hand in hand, and we meet weekly on a Monday just to see where things are, any issues that we have. Remember, the process is, number one, deliver and work on only what is defined in the requirements document. Nothing more fancy. Let's get the basic foundation first. Number two, only do pull requests from Sisters repo. All of Sisters repo, Matthew and I always go through on a weekly basis to make sure there's any changes. And I have forked all of their repos onto our Sisters repo. So once you have your code review and once you actually get those approved, then we can push it up to Peace Corps. So we'll be responsible for doing that. Any other questions about user and what have you, I would suggest making sure you connect with your PM and they will schedule any user activity or any kind of user forum that you need. Again, this is a really great team. They're very responsive, and they will get us the people and the user tests that we need, okay? All right, woo, we're on time. It's 9:14. I'm sorry, it's 12:14. We have 1 minute. So thank you, everyone, and I appreciate the time. And this will be posted, and you will have to have the link to get to it, but it'll post on our channel, and I will push it out to everyone a little later out today, okay? Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great day. All right, see you, Patrick, Annie.
Bye-bye.